Night shifts can be eerie. The world sleeps while you stay awake, surrounded by silence, dim lights, and the occasional creak of an old building. But sometimes it's not just your imagination playing tricks on you. Strange things happen when the world is dark and quiet, things that defy explanation. Tonight, we're sharing 4 terrifying true stories from night shift workers who experienced something so chilling, they'll never forget it. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you might start questioning what really happens in the dead of night. I never believed in the supernatural until that night. Back in 2015, I was working the night shift as a security guard at a shopping mall. It was an easy job, mostly quiet. The mall closed at 10 p.m. and after that, my tasks were simple. Patrol the floors, check the security cameras, and make sure no one was trespassing. Most nights were uneventful, and I welcomed the peaceful silence. But the basement, that was different. The basement housed all the stock rooms, old supplies, and maintenance equipment. It was colder than the rest of the building, and something about it always felt off. Even when the air conditioning wasn't running, there was always this strange chill. My partner, Luis, who had been working there for years, warned me about it on my first shift. "You'll hear things down there," he said. "Ignore them." I had laughed it off at the time, thinking he was just messing with the new guy. But over time, I started to understand what he meant. One night, during my usual 2 a.m. patrol, I had to check the basement. I dreaded that part of my shift the most. The long, dimly lit hallways, the flickering bulbs, and the eerie silence made my skin crawl. As I descended the stairs, I noticed the light at the end of the hallway was flickering more than usual. The bulb above the storage rooms was dying, casting long, shifting shadows on the concrete walls. I sighed, making a mental note to report it to maintenance. Then I heard it. A faint, scratching noise coming from one of the storage rooms. I stopped in my tracks, gripping my flashlight a little tighter. "Probably a rat," I muttered under my breath. But then, in the corner of my eye, something moved. A shadow, tall and thin, darted across the hallway. My breath caught in my throat. I turned quickly, shining my flashlight down the hallway, but there was nothing there. The air felt heavier, and the temperature seemed to drop even more. My rational mind told me it was just my imagination, but my gut screamed otherwise. Trying to shake off the unease, I forced myself to move toward the storage room where the noise had come from. The door was slightly ajar. Slowly, I pushed it open, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was empty, except for a single chair placed directly in the center of the room. I froze. That chair hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. The last time I checked this room, it had been empty. My stomach twisted in knots. The silence was thick, suffocating. Something about the way the chair was positioned. It felt wrong, like it was waiting for someone. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to leave. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, breathy, right behind me. Every hair on my body stood on end. My heart pounded against my ribs as I spun around, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing. Just cold air and the overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. I didn't wait to investigate further. I bolted out of the storage room, slamming the door behind me. My footsteps echoed as I raced up the stairs, my chest tight with panic. By the time I reached the main floor, I was gasping for breath, my hands trembling. I didn't finish my patrol that night. I refused to go back into the basement alone. The next morning, still shaken, I decided to check the security footage. I needed proof. Something to confirm that I hadn't imagined it. I scrolled through the video, watching as I entered the storage room. That's when my blood ran cold. The chair, it was already there. But that wasn't the worst part. As I stood in the room, frozen in fear, the footage caught something else. A shadow, tall and thin, standing right behind me. And then, just before I ran, it moved. 8 years ago, I was working the night shift at a gas station in a quiet town. It was a lonely job, just me, the dimly lit aisles, and the occasional trucker stopping for fuel. The nights were long, filled with the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional flickering of the old fluorescent lights. Most nights were uneventful, but there was one night, one encounter that I still can't explain. It was around 3 a.m., the slowest part of the shift. I was behind the counter, lazily restocking packs of gum when I heard the crunch of tires outside. A single car pulled up to pump 4, but the driver didn't get out. I waited, watching the security monitor, expecting them to step out and start fueling. But minutes passed and the car just sat there. Then the driver's side door finally creaked open. A man in a dark hoodie stepped out. His movements were strange, stiff and calculated, as if he were forcing himself to move in slow motion. Something about him immediately put me on edge. He walked toward the store, but instead of entering, he stopped just outside the glass doors. He didn't look around. He didn't check the pump. He just stood there, staring at me. I cleared my throat. You need something?" I asked, my voice breaking the eerie silence. The man didn't respond. Instead, he slowly lifted his hand and pointed, not at me, but at something behind me. I frowned, confused. Then I turned my head slightly, following his gesture. My eyes landed on the security mirror mounted on the wall behind the counter. It was a wide, convex mirror meant to give me a view of the store's aisles. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The rows of snacks and drinks were exactly as I had left them. But then, movement. In the reflection at the far end of the last aisle, there was a figure. My breath caught in my throat. It was faint, barely visible in the dim lighting, but unmistakably there, a tall, shadowy figure standing completely still at the edge of the aisle. Heart pounding, I spun around, expecting to see someone standing in the store. Nothing. The aisle was empty. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I turned back to the mirror. The figure was gone. Swallowing hard, I quickly glanced back at the glass doors. But the man in the hoodie was already walking back to his car, moving with that same unsettling stiffness. He got inside, started the engine, and drove off without getting gas, without ever stepping inside. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in place. My eyes darted back to the security mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the reflection again. But there was nothing. I needed to check the security footage. My hands were shaking as I rewound the recording. On the screen, I watched the man in the hoodie arrive, stand outside the store, and point at the mirror. Then my stomach dropped. The reflection in the mirror showed the shadowy figure at the end of the aisle. But when I checked the footage from the store's main camera, there was no one there. That was the last time I worked alone on the night shift. Back in 2012, I worked as a night receptionist at an old hotel in a small, quiet town. The hotel had been standing for nearly a century, its once grand design now faded with age. It wasn't a luxurious place, but it was functional. Travelers, truckers, and businessmen passing through would stay for a night or two before moving on. The halls smelled of old wood and faint cleaning chemicals. And at night, the building made strange noises, groaning pipes, creaking floorboards, and sometimes sounds that had no explanation. The hotel had 5 floors, and while most of them felt normal, the 4th floor was different. The air there was colder, even in the middle of summer. The hallway lights flickered more than anywhere else, and guests who stayed there often complained. Some reported hearing footsteps pacing outside their rooms in the dead of night, only to open the door and find nothing. Others spoke of faint whispers right by their ears as they tried to sleep. A few even claimed to hear knocks at their doors, but when they looked through the peephole, No one was there. Some laughed it off, but others refused to stay another night. At first, I didn't pay much attention to these stories. I figured old buildings creaked, and people's minds played tricks on them, especially in the dark. But that changed one night when I experienced something I still can't explain. It was a slow shift, and by 1 a.m., the lobby was completely silent. The security cameras showed empty hallways, and the only sound came from the occasional car passing outside. I was flipping through an old guest log, trying to keep myself awake, when the phone rang. The sharp ring echoed in the quiet lobby, making me jump. I frowned, confused. The phone at the front desk rarely rang that late, unless it was a guest needing something. I picked up the receiver. "Front desk, how can I help you?" At first, there was silence. Then a voice, low, barely above a whisper. "Room 409. Send someone, please." The words were so faint I almost thought I imagined them. The voice sounded strained, as if the person on the other end was struggling to speak. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I quickly checked the system to see which guest was in room 409. My stomach twisted when I saw the entry. Room 409 was empty. No one had checked in for weeks. I felt a chill settle in my chest. I tried telling myself it was just a prank, maybe someone from another room messing around. But the voice, it had sounded too real, too desperate. I hesitated before calling Mark, the hotel's night maintenance guy. He was older than me, had worked there longer, and had heard all the ghost stories before. When I told him about the call, he groaned. "You serious?" he muttered. But he didn't argue. After all, a call had come from that room. We took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The moment the doors slid open, the atmosphere changed. The air was thick, heavy, like we had just stepped into a space we weren't supposed to be in. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by the old yellow wall lamps. The silence was absolute. No humming from the vending machines, no distant sounds of the building settling. Just nothing. We walked toward room 409, our footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. When we reached the door, I knocked. No answer. Mark glanced at me before gripping the handle. To my surprise, it turned easily. It wasn't locked. He pushed the door open and we stepped inside. The room was untouched. The bed was neatly made, the curtains closed, and the air smelled slightly stale, as if no one had been in there for a long time. Nothing seemed out of place, except for one thing. The bathroom light was on. A pale, flickering glow leaked from under the door. Mark exhaled sharply. "Maybe housekeeping left it on," he muttered, though his voice was tense. We stepped closer, and without thinking, Mark pushed the bathroom door open. The light flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the entire room into darkness. And that's when we heard it. A whisper, right between us. It wasn't coming from the hallway, it wasn't coming from the phone. It was in the room, with us. The whisper was low, breathy, almost like someone was speaking right into my ear. But the words weren't clear, it was just a murmur, a jumble of syllables I couldn't understand. I felt my entire body freeze. My breath caught in my throat and my heart slammed against my ribs. Mark must have felt the same thing because, without a word, he grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the door. We bolted. I don't even remember running down the hallway. I just remember the sheer panic, the feeling of something unseen watching us as we fled. We only stopped when we reached the elevator, slamming the button over and over until the doors finally opened. Back in the lobby, we didn't speak for a long time. Mark sat down, rubbing his face with both hands. "I don't want to talk about it," he muttered. I barely slept that morning. When my shift ended, I went straight to the manager's office and convinced him to let me check the security logs. What I found made my blood turn to ice. The phone in room 409 had been disconnected for years. Hospitals are eerie places at night. The long, silent hallways, the distant beeping of monitors, the occasional murmur of voices behind closed doors. But for me, the parking lot was even worse. It was vast, stretching out into the darkness, with only a few flickering lights breaking the gloom. After midnight, it was nearly empty, except for the scattered cars of late-night visitors, tired doctors, and the occasional ambulance pulling in. In 2019, I worked as a night security guard at a hospital. My job was simple: walk the perimeter, make sure no one was lurking around, and check the parking lot for any suspicious activity. Most nights were uneventful, just me and the cold night air. But one winter night, something happened that I still can't explain. It was 2:30 a.m., and my shift was nearly over. The air was freezing, my breath coming out in visible puffs as I made my way through the parking lot. Everything was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic from the main road. I had just turned a corner near the back of the lot when I saw her. A woman, standing alone by a parked car. She was dressed in hospital scrubs, her back turned to me. Her shoulders were shaking slightly as if she were crying. The way she stood, so still yet trembling, made an uneasy feeling creep up my spine. It was bitterly cold, and she had no jacket. I knew most hospital staff parked closer to the entrance. What was she doing all the way out here? I hesitated before calling out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't respond. I stepped closer, my boots crunching against the thin layer of snow on the ground. My flashlight flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the cars. She was still shaking, her head slightly bowed. "Ma'am?" I tried again, louder this time. Still, no answer. Something about her felt wrong. The way she stood so still except for that trembling. The air around me suddenly felt heavier, as if the temperature had dropped even more. I swallowed the unease creeping up my throat and took another step forward. That's when she moved. Without a sound, she turned the corner of the car, disappearing from my line of sight. I quickened my pace, rounding the car immediately after her. She was gone. I stopped in my tracks, my flashlight sweeping the area. There was nowhere she could have gone. The parking lot was wide open, and I would have seen her walking away. Yet, she had simply vanished. My pulse began to race. I bent down, checking the snow on the ground. No footprints. I turned in a slow circle, scanning every inch of the lot. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just the empty rows of cars and the eerie glow of the streetlights. The only footprints in the snow were mine. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I hurried back inside, my mind racing with explanations. Maybe I had imagined her. Maybe the dim light and my exhaustion were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew I had seen someone. When I reached the front desk, the night nurse, Linda, looked up. She was an older woman, friendly but always serious. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell her. "I just saw something weird outside," I said, my voice lower than I intended. A woman in scrubs standing by a car. She looked like she was crying, but when I got closer, she just disappeared. Linda's face changed instantly. The color drained from her cheeks. "Where did you see her?" she asked quietly. "Near the back of the lot, by the older section," I said. "Do you know who it could have been?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder as if making sure no one else was around. Then, in a hushed voice, she said, "That sounds like Emily." I frowned. "Who's Emily?" Linda's eyes darted toward the parking lot doors. "She was a nurse here, used to work night shifts. 10 years ago, she finished a late shift and was walking to her car when..." She hesitated before continuing. "She was hit by a speeding driver right outside. They tried to save her, but she didn't make it." A cold weight settled in my chest. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. "Where did it happen?" Linda's expression was grim. Near the back of the lot, right around where you said you saw her. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth was dry, my hands cold. You're telling me I just saw a... Linda nodded. You're not the first. She went on to explain that over the years, other staff members and visitors had reported seeing a woman in scrubs standing in the parking lot late at night. Some saw her from a distance, others claimed to have spoken to her, only for her to vanish moments later. I stared at Linda, my heart pounding. I had heard ghost stories before, but this was different. I had seen her. I had walked toward her, and she had disappeared right in front of me. I didn't finish my shift that night. The next morning, I put in my resignation. I never worked another night shift again. These stories prove that the night holds secrets we may never understand. Shadows in the basement, whispers in empty rooms, vanishing figures. What would you do if you experienced something like this? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've ever worked a night shift, did you experience anything strange? Stay safe and stay awake. If you love chilling stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.